Day 7 was supposed to be a challenge, but nobody signed up for this level of chaos. In the middle of the stampede, the ground starts to shake, and a massive goblin lord stomps out. This thing looks like a final boss that spawned way too early in the game. The villagers are getting absolutely wrecked, their weapons are shot, and even their best warrior Aesel is in serious trouble. But our MC Kami isn't your average player. Nah, this dude is built different. He's the guy who literally coded this whole world. So, when the Goblin Lord swings its giant mace, Kami does something that's totally cracked. He starts parrying every single blow, counting each one like his life is riding on it. Because low-key it is. The second he hits a specific number, he triggers a secret bug that makes all of his attacks guaranteed critical hits. In a flash, he rushes forward and absolutely demolishes the Goblin Lord, saving the base by a razor-thin margin. But just winning a single battle won't cut it. Kami immediately gets to work upgrading the base to level 8, beefing up the walls and the workshop. That's when Ginger finally unveils his secret weapon. He's created golems that can not only fight alongside their masters, but also help with manual labor. So, how did our boy end up in this mess anyway? It all starts with a game called Last, which is the world's #1 best-selling survival game, where players have to grind for resources, all while trying to survive in a world crawling with monsters. They've also got to build up their bases and try to survive with their friends. The game offers you total strategic freedom and features incredibly deep NPCs, which keeps the whole experience pretty balanced. On top of that, there are constant events and updates being rolled out. So, new stuff is always being added to the game. But here's the kicker. This entire blockbuster title was made by just one person. A shut-in dude by the name of Kamiya Sushi. Just chilling in his room, Kamiya has finished the version 3 update for the game, making it the most polished version yet, no cap. He's just implemented the level 100 base, which triggers the season's final story arc for anyone who achieves it. He then grabs his phone to let his partner know that Season 3 is officially live. But Kamiya isn't even thinking about stopping there. Apparently the man's already brainstorming what he's going to do for the next season. It's been 5 years since he started development and 3 whole years since the game was released. Even after all that time, Kamiya's still got a ton of ideas cooking, and he truly believes the game's only going to get more hype from here on out. A few moments later, his partner Onohara pops into the room, asking if the game is actually for real finished. Kamiya is stunned that Onohara got there so quickly, but Onohara admits that he bolted over the second he got the text. Turns out this Onohara Wataru fellow is the one who handles all the business and licensing for the game. Onohara gives Kamiya major props for managing to finish the whole game basically by himself. But Kamiya humbly mentions that he had to outsource the background music and some of the designs. Despite that, Onohara still thinks it's wild that Kamiya was able to pull off the game pretty much on his own. Kamiya flips the compliment right back, telling Onohara the only reason they got this big was because of him. Essentially because Onohara was holding things down as the producer Kamiya had all the time he needed to focus on creating the game. It turns out Onohara and Kamiya actually go way back, having met each other in high school. Kamiya sees him as a total lifesaver who not only offered to produce his game, but even ditched his plans to go to university after he saw an early build of it before release. Onohara tells Kamiya the game was so good that it was a guaranteed hit, it couldn't possibly flop unless everyone in the world was an idiot. He brings up the fact that the recent user satisfaction survey came back with an insane score of 98. When Kamiya hears that, he decides he's not going to quit until he gets that score to a perfect 100. Onohara, however, thinks that's impossible, saying there's no such thing as a game that every single person is going to like. Kamiya, on the other hand, thinks it's totally possible to get people on board, since they already showed interest by taking the survey, and hooked them at least once. Onohara then switches gears and walks to Kamiya's desk, asking if he ever signed the documents he'd sent him. Kamiya says he did. But since there was a mountain of paperwork, he tells Onohara he's leaving all the nitty-gritty details in his hands. Onohara scoops up the documents with a sinister grin and tells Kamiya that he really appreciates his trust. All of a sudden, 3 absolute units who look like they bench press small cars bust into the room. Onohara tells Kamiya he's taking the documents and in the same breath lets him know that he's completely screwed. Kamiya is totally blindsided and asks what the hell he's talking about, but Onohara just mocks him. He says the only thing Kamiya is good for is making games, and that's why he's stripping him of all rights to his creation Last. Kamiya isn't taking this lying down. He fires back, reminding the traitor that he literally created the game, and they're going to need him for any future updates. But Onohara drops a bomb telling Kamiya that since they've implemented the base level 100 cap, he considers last to be a finished game. Onohara explains that from a business standpoint, any more updates are basically pointless. This is the last straw for Kamiya, who lunges for Onohara's collar, but one of the walking refrigerators slams him to the floor before he can connect. With a smug look, Onohara says he brought the bodyguards along on purpose, because he knew damn well Kamiya wouldn't just roll over. He wasn't about to let this happen quietly. Onohara goes on a tirade saying Kamiya's obsession with the game was holding them back because he kept pushing updates that didn't directly rake in cash. On top of that, Kamiya's creative control was way too tight. This apparently choked their ability to properly expand the merchandise line. But now that the game is complete, Onohara is convinced they can finally squeeze every last drop of profit out of it, especially with Kamiya out of the picture. Kamiya is absolutely gutted, and he chews Onohara out for not even trying to talk to him about this, but Onohara just brushes it off. He just says there's no way in hell Kamiya would have ever agreed to his plans. Then, as a final twist of the knife, Onohara tells Kamiya to get out of the room, because giving that up was also part of the contract he signed. In one fell swoop, Kamiya lost all authority over Last. He thought about filing a lawsuit, of course. But the outlook wasn't great, and to make matters worse, Onohara had already started skillfully manipulating public opinion. He created a whole narrative that made it seem like the game should belong to him all along. Left seething in his room, Kamiya slams his fist on the table and notices something strange on his PC monitor. His curiosity piqued, he clicks on it, and a bizarre message pops up, basically telling him to go live in his game world forever. You know, since he loves the game so much. Before Kamiya can even process what that means, a blinding light erupts from the screen and yanks him in. By the time he opens his eyes, he's not in his room anymore. He's actually inside the game world. He's immediately greeted by the game's official guide, an adorable fairy who introduces herself as Leafy. But while she's explaining the basics of the game, it hits Kamiya. The outfit he's wearing, it's for the free trial version of the game. We're talking about the character with the absolute worst stats, no skills, and zero equipment compatibility. This character is literally designed to be the weakest destined to get wiped out during the first monster raid, just to give new players a taste of the action. With his creator's knowledge, Kamiya knows he's almost certainly going to die on the very first night. Leafy, completely oblivious, cheerfully asks Kamiya to enter his name in the pop-up window. But instead of his name, a light bulb goes off. He remembers a secret back door he built into the game, a hidden code for developer mode. He types in the code and the screen explodes in a brilliant flash of light. It worked. Leafy is completely stunned, and you can see the gears turning in her little fairy head as she realizes Kamiya is the one who created her entire world. She's blushing so hard she looks like she's about to have a system failure, but she pulls it together to properly introduce herself to her literal god. Turns out Leafy is a forest fairy whose job is to protect nature, but her philosophy is that human activity is just a part of nature too. Because of that, she offers all sorts of advice to players who wander into the forest. Kamiya asks her if this is really the world of Last, and she confirms it. No cap, he's in the game. Now thinking strategically, Kamiya asks Leafy if she can access the game's meta information. He specifically wants to see the data related to development, and Leafy says, "You bet," since he's already activated developer mode. Leafy pulls up the info, and it shows exactly what he expected. His name, Kamiya, is listed as the creator for basically everything. But there's one critical change that makes his blood run cold. The Game Master role has been reassigned to Wataru Onohara. Leafy is surprised to see a name she doesn't recognize, and asks Kamiya who this Onohara guy is. With a fresh surge of rage, Kamiya tells her Onohara is the snake who stole the entire game from him. And he's got a stinking feeling that Onohara's scheming is the very reason he's trapped in this game world to begin with. Hearing this, Leafy is absolutely crushed and makes it clear she can't just forgive what Onohara did. Meanwhile, Kamiya's just trying to figure out how in the world he got sucked into his own game. Since there's no logical explanation, he can only boil it down to one single terrifying fact. He absolutely cannot let himself die in this game world. Kamiya swears he's going to survive this whole ordeal and take his game back from that traitor Onohara. He then turns to Leafy and asks if she's got his back, and she's all in. With that sorted, Kamiya hits the warp feature. He pops up at the base station, which is still just a dinky level 1 setup. Leafy apologizes, admitting that a level 1 base was the best she could pull together. But Kamiya isn't even bothered. This is exactly how he designed the game's starting specs. It turns out that even when he's in developer mode, All he can access are the basic parameters. Kamiya then steps inside the base where he spots a magic stone chilling at the back of the room. This isn't just any rock, it's an arcanite otherwise known as the source ore. This thing is cracked. It's a special stone that can absorb resources and convert them into weapons or items. Since it's only the tutorial, Leafy thinks Kamiya doesn't really need it, but he immediately shuts that down. He declares that he's definitely doing the tutorial. His reasoning is pretty solid. Monsters don't spawn during the tutorial, which makes it the safest possible time for him to grind for materials. Leafy has to agree with him, because trying to gather stuff normally would be almost impossible. That's because Kamiya is stuck with the trial version character, a build literally designed to get wiped out on the very first night. Even Kamiya knows that in his current state he doesn't stand a ghost of a chance, so he tells Leafy they need to get started right away. There's simply no time to waste. Leafy agrees and instantly kicks the tutorial into gear. Kamiya immediately starts sprinting around grabbing every material he can get his hands on. Since he knows this world like the back of his hand, he manages to return by evening looking totally beat up. He tells Leafy they've got to start crafting before it gets dark. Leafy is completely floored that he actually gathered enough materials, but Kamiya reveals he made it possible within the game's official specifications. The crazy part is, no player had ever actually managed to pull it off until this very moment. Kamiya gets right to the crafting process, and in no time produces a wooden sword and a small wooden barricade. He's honestly impressed he even got the barricade, but he also knows it's about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. After all, the trial version character was never meant to survive the first night. And even though the enemies are going to move exactly how he programmed them to, Kamiya knows his chance of survival is at best a few %. Usually this is the point where the game would nudge the player toward buying the full version. But this time things are completely different. Later that night, Kamiya gets the quest to survive until morning, and Leafy just wishes him good luck. Kamiya stands guard in front of the base waiting for the enemy. He soon spots a deer, but while he's just staring at it, the deer gets absolutely taken out by a goblin. These are basically low-level monsters with next to zero intelligence. They sometimes attack in huge groups, so they're definitely not something to underestimate. Kamiya, on the other hand, is rocking trash-tier stats, a wooden sword, and no special skills. Not a great look. Without wasting any time, the goblin lunges straight for Kamiya, trying to jam its sword into his neck. Against all odds, Kamiya actually manages to dodge the strike. Leafy knows he was only able to dodge because he knows the goblin's parameters inside and out. Still, the goblin keeps swinging like a maniac, and eventually Kamiya gets tagged taking a nasty cut on his arm. That hit is a brutal reality check telling him his stats are pure garbage. Even when he knows an attack is coming, his body just can't react in time. To make it worse, his strength is also pathetically low, which was pretty much expected. Before he even knows what's happening, he gets kicked square in the chest, which makes him hack up blood as he gets sent flying, and just from how bad it hurts. He realizes the pain is 100% real, but there's no way in hell he's going to sit back and watch the game's creator get taken out by his own creation. So, Kamiya books it toward the base, baiting the goblin into chasing him down. Knowing he can't go toe-to-toe with it, he pulls a big brain move leaping into the air while activating his small barricade skill. The goblin having zero chill jumps right after him, but by the time it lands, it's caught in his trap. And just like that, the monster gets straight up impaled. With the goblin locked down, Kamiya sees his one shot. If he puts every ounce of his weight into a single strike, he might just finish it. He launches himself at the goblin, pouring everything he's got into the attack. He smashes it right in the head, instantly killing it and clearing the quest. At that moment, Kamiya vows that he will survive this game no matter what. It's going to be a hell of a grind, but he's motivated by the fact that he's got one insane advantage. He's the only one who knows every single secret and exploit in this world. Kamiya is ready to claw his way up from rock bottom and take back everything that was stolen from him. The next morning, Kamiya stands before the magic stone holding his sword just to feel its weight. No cap, the thing feels way too real in his hands. Leafy pops up asking if he's going on another material run, but Kamiya tells her, nah. He explains that yesterday's tutorial was more than enough. Today he's just going to focus on crafting, because there's something he needs to take care of, ASAP. When Leafy opens the inventory, her jaw hits the floor seeing the insane amount of materials Kamiya already gathered. Basically, you can collect all kinds of materials around the base, and they all get converted into 3 basic resources that get stored in the mana stone. The first resource is mana, which is pretty much life energy used to develop your people, or to craft magic-type items. The second is element, which you need for physical goods like food and buildings, and the third is gold. You use gold to buy stuff you can't craft yourself. With his resources stacked, Kamiya gets right down to business. By the time he's done, he's managed to craft himself a new bow, 10 arrows, a watchtower, and a bunch of logs. He really wishes he could have made something more powerful, but his starter stats are holding him back big time. Kamiya then says he's got to find some allies if he actually wants to make it past day 7. As it turns out, something called a stampede happens on day 7. Monsters attack every night. That's a given, but the stampede is a massive monster outbreak that's a whole different beast. It hits every 7 days, and the difficulty gets cranked to an absolutely insane level. We're talking about endless hordes of monsters just pouring out. The difficulty is jacked up so high that even players with the full retail version would struggle to stay alive. In theory, it's already tough for a trial version character to even reach day 7, but if they do, it's considered flat out impossible for them to clear a stampede. The logic is, if you could beat the hardest content in the demo, why would you buy the game? Even Leafy is starting to freak out, because she knows exactly how gnarly a stampede can get. So, Kamiya asks the million-dollar question, what actually happens if he dies in this world? Leafy admits she has no idea, but she does know that NPCs don't respawn. This basically means that if Kamiya dies, it's probably game over for good. Still, Leafy assures Kamiya she'll help him out in any way she can. However, due to some strict regulations, she's not allowed to participate in any combat whatsoever. Even when it comes to strategy, she knows Kamiya doesn't need his handheld. What he needs is intel. So she promises to be his eyes and ears on the ground. That's exactly what Kamiya wanted to hear, and he thanks Leafy, telling her he's counting on her big time. He also tells her to drop the whole creator title and just use his name, but Leafy's not having any of it. With that sorted, Kamiya steps outside and gets to work on building a watchtower. He can't help but complain about how annoying it is to have to be physically present to build everything, and Leafy totally gets it. She explains that his base level is still way too low, which is why he can't just deploy buildings from the map view like a real RTS god. After the watchtower is finally finished, he heads to the top. Kamiya climbs up to get a good look at the world around him, and bruh, he's completely floored. He can't get over just how incredible his creation looks from this high up. Leafy gasses him up a little, reminding him that he's the one who brought this entire world to life. Seeing how amazing it all is just fuels his fire, making him more determined than ever to snatch it all back from Onohara. Later that night, the familiar quest pops up on his screen, Survive the Night. He pulls out his bow ready and waiting for whatever the game throws at him. A few moments later, 2 goblins creep out from the dark forest. He isn't even surprised since he knows the rules of engagement are totally different from the first day. Kamiya doesn't hesitate for a second, but damn, pulling back the bowstring is a real workout since there are no strength modifiers at his low level. Of course, he can't really complain about it considering he's the one who designed the whole system. You'd think the creator would be cracked, but his first shot misses completely. Leafy chimes in explaining that accuracy modifiers aren't active yet either, so again Kamiya has zero room to complain. He built this pain himself. Taking a deep breath, Kamiya fires another shot, and this time he lands a solid hit on one of the goblin's legs. The creature goes down screaming, but Kamiya gives it zero chill and immediately follows up with an arrow straight to the chest. To finish the job, Kamiya takes a leap of faith from the watchtower to close the distance with the last goblin. He's already figured out the meta from the previous night's encounter. There's a way for him to stay one step ahead even though his stats are now that the goblin's right in his face, his aim is true, and the arrow sinks deep into the monster's body. Kamiya pops off another shot to bring the goblin to its knees. Then he just casually walks over and delivers a final headshot to make sure it's down for good. And just like that, he survived the second night. Leafy is hyped, celebrating the W with him, but they have no idea a mysterious woman is watching the whole thing go down from the woods. The next morning, Kamiya heads out to recover his arrows because in this economy, you can't afford to waste a single resource. Basically, fired arrows have a chance to break, based on RNG, but anything that's still intact can be recovered and reused. While he's looking, Kamiya knows there should be 2 good arrows, but he can only find one of them. He's not shocked though, because he's pretty sure he knows exactly what happened to the second one. Right on cue, a new quest pops up telling him to find the missing arrow's whereabouts. Kamiya quickly spots a trail leading deeper into the forest and starts to follow it, telling Leafy to be careful. Leafy just assures him she'll be fine, explaining that she can't interfere with the game's content, and likewise the game can't harm her. It turns out this is all part of a pretty sick feature in the game, where NPCs can actually become your allies. You just have to meet certain conditions during game. Every now and then, a random NPC will wander into your base. If you can manage to clear their unique recruitment quest, that NPC will join your team, and these guys have all sorts of special skills. They've got everything from combat buffs to production masters, which makes them absolutely essential for beating the game, especially since his actual life is on the line. No cap Kamiya knows he's going to need all the allies he can get. Meanwhile, the mysterious hunter who was watching them last night is hiding up in a tree. She thinks the coast is clear and jumps down when she spots what looks like a trap on the ground. But suddenly Kamiya appears right behind her, telling her to chill because they aren't her enemies. But nah, Anemone isn't hearing any of it. She just straight up bolts into the woods. This leaves Kamiya totally shook, cause bruh, a cutscene skip like this was definitely not in his patch notes. Leafy then drops a major truth bomb now that Kamiya, the literal game creator, is basically an NPC in this world. The game's pre-written script has been completely yeeted out the window. Leafy basically tells him he's gotta use his actual social skills to persuade Anemone. Cause, let's be real, they definitely freaked her out. And that's when it hits Kamiya like a freight train. Theory crafting in his bedroom is a whole different universe from actually being on the ground. He starts stressing that one wrong move could turn these now living, breathing characters hostile for good. Later on, Kamiya makes it back to base after doing a little resource farming. Leafy asks if he managed to snag all the necessary supplies, and Kamiya confirms it, saying it was a good thing, that no monsters spawned on him. He strolls into their makeshift base and says they should get to crafting ASAP. Leafy seems a little skeptical, asking if he really thinks this plan of his is going to work. Kamiya fires back that he literally wrote Anemone's entire backstory. He's betting the farm that this method he's about to try has the highest success rate. So here's the tea on Anemone's lore. She was a hunter who lived out in the wild with just her dad. After he passed away, she just kept on with that lone wolf lifestyle, which is pretty much exactly how Kamiya designed her character. But he's got a theory that if he can just give her a taste of that warm, fuzzy feeling of having a squad, she might actually ditch her solo queue lifestyle and join his party. Even so, Kamiya knows it's a total gamble, since they're way off script. Kamiya gets to work crafting the items he needs for his master plan: an iron pot, a ladle, some salt and pepper, some ground meat, and 2 sets of plates and forks. With all the ingredients ready, Kamiya starts cooking, and he's honestly shocked that he's actually chefing it up inside his own game. That's a feature he never in a million years thought would be a thing. Leafy chimes in that once his level gets high enough, he can just magically generate finished meals, but Kamiya says that actually cooking for himself isn't a bad vibe at all. Leafy notes that Kamiya is pretty good at this, and he explains that since he's lived alone for so long, he's used to being a shut-in, so he could pour every waking moment into developing the game. Kamiya mentions that right after high school, Anohara used to swing by his place all the time, but man, that feels like a lifetime ago. A few moments later, Anemone pops out of the trees, her bow drawn and aimed right at Kamiya's chest. Kamiya throws his hands up, telling Anemone that they aren't her enemies. This just confuses her, and she asks what he means by they. And that's when it clicks for Kamiya. Anemone can't even see Leafy. He quickly backpedals, telling Anemone it's just him out here alone. He introduces himself, and she does the same. Anemone then asks where the hell she is, explaining that one minute she was hunting, and the next thing she knew, she was in this forest, in a place she didn't recognize at all. Kamiya tells her he's in the same boat, having just gotten here himself, so he's just as lost. He then points to the food cooking over the fire, asking Anemone if she's hungry. He reassures her it's not poisoned or anything, he just made way too much for one person to eat. Kamiya dishes up a plate and hands it over to Anemone. He explains it's a hamburger steak, which is just ground up beef onions and breadcrumbs seasoned with salt and pepper and then grilled. Anemone takes one bite and her eyes go wide. The flavor completely blows her mind, and she absolutely demolishes the rest of it in seconds. Kamiya just smiles, watching her enjoy the meal. When she's finished, she thanks him for the food, telling him she's never tasted anything like that in her entire life. She then asks if she could possibly have some more, and Kamiya says of course, since he's got all the ingredients. But he lets her know there's a small price. Anemone immediately asks Kamiya what he wants from her, and Kamiya basically tells her he wants her on the team, because let's be real, they're in a total death trap. Anemone's kind of mulling it over, so Kamiya drops some wisdom: the only way you don't end up on the menu is to be the one holding the fork. Right on cue, the system dings Kamiya with a classic survive the night quest, letting him know Anemone will join up, but only if he can prove he's not dead weight by fighting with her and actually win. But plot twist Anemone surprises him by saying she's totally down to join the battle right now. It doesn't take long for things to kick off. 3 goblins pop up in the distance, and Leafy thinks that's the entire welcoming committee. But Kamiya's spidey senses are tingling, telling him there are more hiding in the woods. And what do you know, a whole new wave emerges from the trees. Kamiya gears up for a throwdown, letting Anemone know he needs her to watch his back. He then pulls his sword right out of his inventory. And this move has Anemone's jaw on the floor, wondering if he's a legit monostone contractor. Without missing a beat, Kamiya charges the goblins. He's bobbing and weaving through their attacks like a pro. The second he gets one of them isolated, he shouts to Anemone, who nails the goblin with a perfect headshot. Anemone is genuinely impressed. Even in the thick of it all, Kamiya is maintaining a perfect line of sight for her. Our boy keeps scrapping with the goblins, and the moment he creates another opening, he gives Anemone the signal to take the shot. Anemone fires in an instant, punching a hole straight through another goblin's brain. One of the others suddenly tackles Kamiya, knocking him flat, but he's already got so much momentum he just yeets the goblin right off of him. It barely gets airborne before Anemone introduces its face to an arrow. At this point, the remaining goblins are absolutely livid that these two have been wrecking their squad. They start rushing Kamiya with zero chill, while a few others peel off to deal with Anemone. Anemone fires, first planting an arrow dead center in a goblin's chest. She knows she won't have time for a second shot though, so she immediately whips out her dagger. She blocks an incoming swing just as Kamiya yells for her to fall back toward the cabin. He tells her not to worry about finishing them off. Anemone trusts his call and pulls off a sick backflip to get some distance. The goblin chasing her doesn't think twice and runs headfirst into a trap, falling into a spike pit they'd already set up. Kamiya cracks a smile. His plan worked perfectly. No cap, he's feeling pretty damn smart for coming up with the trap idea. Anemone immediately flips the script and goes on the offensive, putting the fear of God into the goblin that was just hunting her. Kamiya, on the other hand, is having a hell of a time with a mace-wielding goblin that's trying to turn his head into a crater. He realizes he's struggling so hard because his character's base stats are straight-up garbage. Before he can react, the goblin knocks his sword out of his hand. Just as it's about to deliver the final smash, an arrow flies out of nowhere and sinks into the goblin's skull. It drops dead instantly. Kamiya is shook, and when he looks over, he sees Anemone already finished off the other goblin. She took care of business up close and personal with her dagger. That lightning-fast kill gave her just enough time to save his ass. And with that, Kamiya manages to survive through day 3. Once the dust settles, Kamiya goes to the cabin to manage his inventory with the monostone. It's seeing this that finally confirms for Anemone that he really is a monostone contractor. Kamiya plays it cool and confirms it, saying he only just recently contracted the magic stone. Apparently, NPCs in this world interpret player-specific abilities as a form of special magic. They believe it's a power that's only usable by those who have a contract with a Mona stone. It's basically their lore-friendly explanation for game mechanics. Kamiya decides to make his move and tells Anemone she should team up with him, especially since she has nowhere else to go. Besides, he admits that he desperately needs allies if he's going to make it out of this alive. Anemone mentions the common belief that circles around people who've contracted with the Mona stone. The legend says they all have some kind of world-saving destiny, which gets Anemone thinking. She starts to believe that maybe it was fate that she got lost and ended up crossing paths with Kamiya. On top of all that, she gives him major props for his skills in combat. She then holds out her hand to seal the deal, and a system notification promptly informs Kamiya that Anemone has officially joined his crew. The very next morning, Kamiya gets up at the crack of dawn to whip up some breakfast. Not long after Anemone emerges, and bruh Kamiya just about has a heart attack when he sees how ridiculously gorgeous she is without all her heavy combat gear on. My boy gets so flustered he has to spin around so she doesn't catch him blushing up a storm. Anemone explains that she's lived with just her father out in the forest for ages, so all of this is a pretty major change for her. Apparently, Kamiya's main goal is to level up the base to add more rooms as fast as humanly possible, because while he admits Anemone's addition is a huge boost to their combat power, he knows the two of them alone don't stand a chance against the coming stampede. This is why upgrading the base is the absolute key to their survival. After breakfast, Kamiya heads out to grind for materials, and Anemone can't help but be impressed, complimenting his crazy efficiency at gathering supplies. But once they're back at the base, she notices Kamiya looks stressed and asks him what's wrong. Kamiya has to break the bad news. They're still way short on the resources they need to upgrade the base. Anemone is totally confused, asking what he even means by leveling up the base. So, Kamiya explains that if they can cram enough resources into the magic stone, they can tap into its power to construct new buildings and throw up some much-needed barricades. He tells her that's why he asked for her help grinding, but it looks like even with both of them on it, it's just not enough. Kamiya then drops the bombshell that a massive monster outbreak happens like clockwork every 7 days, and they're gonna need those barricades and way more traps. He makes it crystal clear that if they have any hope of making it through this, they have to be prepared. Hearing this, Anemone doesn't waste a second telling Kamiya she's heading right back out to gather more resources. Kamiya thanks her for the assist and says he'll try to cook up some other options while she's gone. Left alone, Kamiya starts thinking about what a pain this leveling process is, even though he managed to recruit a powerhouse like Anemone super early. He finds himself wishing he had some kind of drop rate boost to speed things up. According to Leafy's handy tips, it turns out that some character abilities, and even certain magic items, have special effects that can seriously juice the drop rates for rare loot. The only problem is, Kamiya's stuck with a trial version character, which means he gets none of those sweet bonuses. Since that plan's a no-go, Kamiya tells Leafy they need to think outside the box. His big idea is to have her pull up all the developer mode consoles. Leafy is totally on board, excitedly mentioning how sick it would be if they could just tweak the game's parameters directly. Kamiya points out that's a tough ask system-wise, and even if they could, trying it while the game is live is playing with fire. That's because this game is a complex beast, with all sorts of AI adjustment systems running in real time to keep things balanced. Basically, the second a number goes out of whack, the AI swoops in to correct it instantly. The catch, however, is that these corrections only work for tiny errors within the game's design. If you make too many changes, you could push it past the AI's correction limit, causing all sorts of unexpected game-breaking bugs. But Kamiya is dead certain they won't survive the 7th day with their current setup. So, he starts racking his brain for another method that goes beyond normal gameplay. Suddenly, a light bulb goes off with his developer functions. There might be a cheat to level up without any resources at all. He quickly asks Leafy if it's possible for them to activate the instant build mode. Now, instant build mode is a test function used during development that lets you construct facilities and make upgrades without needing a single resource. It clicks for Leafy. If they use this, the system's AI won't even try to interfere with corrections. Kamiya confirms it, saying the system is built to accept any changes made under developer authority without question. And since Kamiya himself is logged in using developer mode, Leafy figures the application programming interface. The API should be wide open. She dives right in to search for it, and in no time she's found it. Kamiya wastes no time asking if she can get access to it. Leafy says it looks impossible from the console, but she thinks if he dives in directly, he might just be able to pull it off. But before Kamiya can even shout a warning about how dangerous it is, Leafy just full sends it and dives right in. Once she's inside, she immediately locates the access point and starts jamming in the set of instructions she needs to run. But while she's doing this, the system's maintenance AI goes into overdrive, thinking Leafy is just some kind of bug that needs to be squashed. Realizing she's in some serious trouble, Leafy cranks up her speed, trying to get her task done before she gets deleted. Just a few seconds later, she finally gets access, does what she needs to do, and then frantically yanks herself out of there. With sweat pouring down his face, Kamiya immediately asks if she's all right, and she assures him she's totally fine. But then she casually mentions that she almost got straight up eaten by the maintenance AI. Kamiya isn't even surprised, since he knows Leafy hacking into the system isn't exactly normal protocol. He puts 2 and 2 together. The system must have flagged her as a virus and went in for the kill. Leafy absolutely loses her mind when she hears she was almost terminated. Kamiya then asks if she can try peeking into the system from the console, which doesn't require her to physically go inside. Leafy gives it a shot and then screams in shock, realizing the maintenance AIs have multiplied like crazy. There's a whole army of them now. When Kamiya hears this, he knows that trying to get into that same API again is going to be next to impossible. Leafy starts apologizing, but Kamiya cuts her off, telling her it's not her fault at all. In fact, it's proof that the security system is built different. Actually, Kamiya feels like he's the one who should be saying sorry to Leafy. He feels bad for making her take on such a high-risk mission. Still, he's just glad she's safe, and Leafy runs over to give him a big hug. Thanks to all her hard work, Kamiya now has the option for an instant build. He smashes that button, and when Emily gets back, she's shocked to see the base has had a total glow-up. It's way bigger with more rooms and even barricades set up for protection. Just like that, the base hits level 3, and Anemone can't stop talking about how cracked these magic stones are. Kamiya tells Anemone she can pick any hut she wants, but adds that she should probably decide which one pretty quick. Anemone is confused and asks him what he means by that. But before she can even finish her sentence, a massive beam of light housing a portal slams down right in the middle of the base. And Kamiya just calmly tells her, "See, we're about to run out of huts." By the time the light fades, a whole crowd of people are standing there, looking around totally bewildered about where they are. In the group we see a young boy named Asel and his mom Rira. Startled by all the newcomers, Anemone instinctively reaches for her sword, but Kamiya quickly stops her. Kamiya notices that Asel has already moved to the front of the other villagers, ready to act as a human shield if things go south. Taking a deep breath, Kamiya decides to introduce himself to the new arrivals. He tells them that he's a newcomer too, having only been living there for a few days before they showed up. Kamiya lays it out for them. The base is smack in the middle of a forest crawling with monsters. And every single night, those monsters swarm the base trying to attack. Kamiya makes it clear that if they want to survive, they're all going to have to work together. Channeling his inner commander, Kamiya speaks with a firm voice, asking the new folks to lend him their strength. Right then, an old man with white hair named Sylvan steps up, asking Kamiya if he also just arrived here. Kamiya explains that he was led to this place by a magic stone. Sylvan nods, saying he's heard stories about it, but he never dreamed he'd actually be summoned to the source. At least not while he was still alive anyway. But suddenly, another villager, some jacked-up dude named Waldo, storms forward, telling everyone not to listen to a word Kamiya says. Waldo argues that for all they know, Kamiya could have used some kind of transfer magic to kidnap them all. He then looks over at two of his buddies, and with a nod, the three of them start walking off. Kamiya calls out, asking where they think they're going, and Waldo says they need to check the area for themselves. He claims he can't even be sure if monsters are actually a real threat around here. He tells the other villagers to stay put while he and his crew go out to investigate. Kamiya then turns to Anemone, telling her to protect the villagers while he keeps an eye on the group that decided to go exploring on their own. As they're trekking through the woods, Kamiya warns the villagers not to get too deep, but Waldo is so hard-headed. He completely blows off every single one of Kamiya's warnings. See, this whole area around their base is a gold mine for resources, but at the same time, it's a total danger zone. Monsters are spawning here day and night, and according to the game's rules, you can't just bounce to a new base. Once you leave your current one, that's it. The further you stray from the base, the more jacked the monsters get, which is basically the game's way of keeping players on a tight leash. The whole thing is designed to keep players from wandering off too far. A few moments later, Waldo and his crew spot a bunch of super cute bunnies with little horns on their heads. One of his guys asks Kamiya if these are the monsters that attack the base, and Kamiya confirms they are. Waldo, however, thinks that's a load of bull, so Kamiya decides to hang back and let him learn this lesson the hard way. Little do they know, these aren't just any bunnies. They're known as hunter bunnies. And these things are carnivorous, absolutely ferocious, rabbit-type monsters. The bunny's whole strategy is to use its harmless look to bait prey into a false sense of security. Then once you're comfortable, they surround you, and the whole squad attacks at once. Before Waldo and his boys even know what's hitting them, the bunnies descend on them like a furry plague. The trio is screaming bloody murder, and Kamiya rushes over yelling at them to close their eyes and hold their breath. Waldo is looking at him like he's crazy, but Kamiya just screams at him to hurry up and do it. The three guys reluctantly listen, and Kamiya whips out 3 bottles of pepper, chucking them right at the bunnies. The bottles shatter, and the spicy cloud makes the bunnies fall back and retreat from the fight. Kamiya immediately tells Waldo and the others to make a run for it. But instead of just booking it, Waldo, the absolute genius, opens his eyes to see what just happened. Naturally, some of the pepper gets in his eyes and he starts tearing up. Kamiya just grabs one of the wounded guys and shouts that they're all heading straight back to the base. You don't have to tell them twice. They all fall in line behind Kamiya because the bunnies are already getting back on their feet. After a mad dash, they make it back to the safety of the base. Waldo and the others get patched up. And with that, the villagers really start to settle in and split up into different groups. Some of them started combat training, while others helped to get everything organized. During a training session, one villager points out that Waldo seems way more motivated than he was before. Waldo just says that the monsters were pretty tough, but he's feeling confident they can take them down next time. While all this is going down, Leafy comes over to Kamiya saying she's really glad they have more allies now. Kamiya gives a really short answer, and Leafy can tell something is wrong, so she asks him what the problem is. and Kemiya just glances over toward Aesol. Turns out, in the early stages of the game, there are these built-in tutorial-like events and characters. They're put there to help players get the rules of the world, and apparently Aesol is one of those characters. He's literally programmed to teach players that dead NPCs can't be revived, which is going to happen during the monster attack that night. Yeah, it turns out Aesol is fated to die in that battle. The players are then supposed to learn that NPCs are irreplaceable when they watch Aesol's mother grieve for him, since Aesol is going to die so soon. Kemiya is left wondering if he actually has the juice to change the kid's destiny after the day's training. Waldo and the fighters get back completely starving, but the women in the group have already cooked up something for them to eat. In no time, everyone at the base is sitting around the table, chowing down. Acel playfully asks Anemone how his swordplay is, and Anemone admits his skills are pretty decent, which gets Aesol all hyped up. But Anemone also lets him know that his archery skills, on the other hand, still need a ton of work. Kemiya, though, is totally zoned out, not even eating, just staring at Aesol, because he knows the kid is just a character in a game. He's doing this to teach the players the rules of the game, knowing that even if they try to bench Osil, the kid would eventually get overconfident, jump into the fight, and get himself deleted. This is basically the brutal wake-up call that shows players these NPCs don't respawn. Waldo pulls Aesol into a bro hug, ruffling his hair, and talking about how he's finally become a real man. But his mom immediately tells Waldo to stop gassing him up. Aesol then looks at his mother, arguing that monsters are constantly gunning for them. He tells her that he's got no other option but to learn how to throw down. His mom shoots back that he doesn't need to fight, because that's what the adults are for. But Aesol hits her with a counter, reminding his mom that he needs to be strong enough to protect everyone, saying that's exactly how his dad was. Rera chimes in, telling Aesol that while his father was no doubt a beast, he was smart enough to never confuse being reckless with being courageous. Hearing that, it finally clicks for Kemiya. He realizes that recklessness and courage are two completely different things, and if he wants to keep Aesol alive, he's going to have to switch up his whole strategy. Kemiya now understands he needs a plan that actually has a shot at working, one that's backed by real courage, not just a death wish. Just then, Sylvan joins the conversation. He tells Osol to listen to his mother and quit trying to be so reckless. And this time, Osol actually takes the old man's words to heart. Sylvan then proposes they all team up to defend the village, but the grim reality hits them. It's not really their village anymore. Out of nowhere, Sylvan asks Kemiya if they've got any booze lying around. Waldo is completely thrown off, asking the old man why he's thinking about alcohol when a battle is about to break out. Sylvan says that's precisely the reason he wants it. He's already made up his mind that he's not going to die sober. Waldo just calls that a pretty pathetic way to go out, and with that, the whole group just bursts out laughing. Kemiya tells them if they can survive the raid tonight, he'll figure out a way to get them some drinks to celebrate. Waldo is the first one on his feet, all hyped up, but Kamiya's mood is still pretty down, and Leafy asks him what's bugging him. Kemiya admits he can't shake the feeling that he's the one who tossed this group into a hardcore survival death game, even though he knows it's a necessary evil to create the best game ever. Leafy totally gets it, but she reminds Kemiya that without his efforts, these NPCs wouldn't even exist in the first place. Kemiya then says he refuses to be some trash creator who doesn't own up to the consequences of his own creations. Later that evening, Kemiya calls everyone together and informs them that they should be ready for another wave of monsters. He says they need to go over their defensive formation to be better prepared. Kemiya explains that anyone not on the front lines will be on lookout duty around the perimeter, but from inside the safety of the base. He tells them that the monsters typically attack from a single direction, but he doesn't want anyone getting complacent. So he orders everyone to split up and keep their eyes peeled from all angles. As for the combat team, their three most cracked archers are going to form a specialized squad. An enemy will be leading them. Kemiya then tells the others to grab their swords and get to the front because they'll be fighting in pairs. One duo will act as bodyguards for the archers, while Waldo's team will be the main frontline force. Waldo is practically vibrating with excitement when he hears this, saying he can't wait to get a piece of the action. He then asks Kemiya who he's partnering up with, and Kemiya casually drops that Azel will be with him. This news sends a shockwave through Azel and his mother, and his mom instantly protests. She tells Kemiya that there's no way Azel can just be thrown into a real battle like this. Kemiya looks at the woman and says he genuinely understands her worries, but points out that just hanging back doesn't mean you're safe. Kemiya explains that if Azel has the will to fight and the ability to back it up, then the sooner he gets stronger, the better. He finishes by saying that getting this experience now dramatically increases his odds of survival. Even with the plan laid out, Rira's low-key freaking out, but Kamiya tells her not to sweat it, promising he's going to pull out all the stops to keep Azel in one piece. So, here's the 500 IQ play. Kamiya is intentionally using Aso as bait to predict how the enemy will move. He knows the system's AI is coded to ensure the kid dies, and he's going to exploit that. It's a total long shot, but Kamiya figures if he's going to defy a canon event, he's got to be willing to take some massive risks. Anemone chimes in telling Rira that she can no-cap trust Kamiya's skills in a fight, but Kamiya clarifies that he won't drag Azel into this unless the kid is all in. He barely gets the words out before Azel jumps up, shouting that he's ready to go. Turns out he wants to be a beast on the battlefield just like his dad. With that settled, they're good to go. Kamiya then gives a killer hype speech to get all the fighters in the zone for the upcoming battle as night begins to creep in. That's when Kamiya gets the quest for the 4th day. The mission is simple, survivable until morning. Shortly after, all hell breaks loose and the fight is ongoing just as he predicted. Kamiya also tells Leafy to stick to Oso like glue and to give him a heads up the second something seems off. Anemone is posted up in the watchtower, with her squad ordering them to rain arrows down on the goblins. She tells them their aim doesn't have to be perfect, they just need to cause enough chaos to shatter the enemy's formation. While the goblins are scattered and confused, Kamiya and his assault team dive in to pick off any that get separated. His orders are clear, take them out one by one, but don't you dare break up the two-man teams and lose their numbers advantage. Kamiya also yells at Waldo to make damn sure no enemies get anywhere near that watchtower. Waldo just scoffs back, basically saying, "Bruh, you don't even have to tell me." It's pretty clear the number of monsters has shot up, which is probably because their base level has also gotten a boost. But even though this is their first real throwdown, the fighters are actually holding their ground like champs. They're sticking to their two-person cells, which completely messes with the enemy's coordination, letting them finish the goblins off. Waldo is having the time of his life, absolutely tearing through the goblins and slicing them down like they're made of wet paper. Waldo is busy with one goblin when he notices the thing is just blankly staring off in some other direction. He seizes the opportunity to finish it off, mocking it for getting distracted. He has no idea the system's program just fully activated. This new programming has given the goblins a single directive: take out Aso at all costs. The fight keeps going pretty well for our side, thanks in huge part to the traps they set up before the battle. Those traps are seriously thinning the herd and have taken out a good chunk of the enemy forces. Kamiya also realizes the enemies are ridiculously easy to read, and it's all because they're beelining straight for Azel. But this is a game world we're talking about, and it's not about to let them cruise to an easy victory. All of a sudden, the goblins get a massive power-up and start fighting like rabid beasts. Anemone spots the goblins moving in a super weird way, so she immediately leaps from the watchtower to join the fight on the ground. Down below, Leafy is doing her best to stay right next to Azel. But in a split second, she sees goblins flanking Kamiya and screams a warning. Before he can even turn, a different group of goblins has already slammed into Azel, knocking him to the ground. Pure panic flashes across Kamiya's face as he screams at Azel to get back on his feet right now. One of the goblins is about to land a killing blow, but an arrow fired by Anemone stops it cold, punching a hole straight through its eye. Shockingly, the goblin just rips the arrow out of its own face and completely ignores Anemone. Anemone is floored when she sees the goblins aren't paying her any attention at all, which is just plain bizarre. This behavior is completely different from how goblins are supposed to operate. Meanwhile, Waldo is still wrecking shop when a goblin suddenly yeets him across the battlefield. Waldo is totally stunned by the sudden power, and before anyone can react, one of the goblins has closed the distance to Azel, who's just shaking in fear. Kamiya roars at him to get up and grab his his damn sword. Just as Azel is about to get his head taken off, Kamiya lunges forward and blocks the deadly attack. Kamiya finds himself struggling to hold back the goblin's immense power, and he starts to wonder if this is the system's override to make sure Aso's death flag is triggered. While he's locked in this desperate struggle, the goblin's sharp claws dig deep into his shoulder. The searing pain causes him to let out a blood-curdling scream. A goblin sees its chance to take Azel down for good, but Anemone ain't having any of it, swooping in to slash the creature and knock it flat. Just as the goblin tries to get back on its feet, a seriously ticked-off Waldo shows up and just decks it, planting it right back on the ground. He's literally gloating about how easy it is to punch these things since they're built just like people. Kamiya shouts for Waldo and Anemone to draw the goblin's attention, and Waldo straight up jumps on top of one of them. He then proceeds to beat it into a green smear with zero chill, while Anemone whips out her bow and starts letting arrows fly. She's dropping goblins left and right, screaming at the fighters to push the line forward. Before long, Kamiya finds himself locked in a struggle with another goblin and yells at Aesel to just smack the monster on its head. Aesel completely freezes up, so Kamiya has to shout a reminder that this is the defining moment that will shape his entire future. Kamiya spells it out for him, saying that if he wants to see tomorrow, he's gotta start fighting. "Don't you want to be strong like your father?" Kamiya asks, and Loki, that's all the motivation Aesel needs to finally bring his weapon down on the goblin's head. This creates the perfect opening for Kamiya to drive his sword deep into the goblin's neck, ending it for good. Kamiya gives Aesel props for his courage and tells him they've only got a few more to go. With a second wind, Kamiya and his crew go absolutely feral, intensifying their assault and wiping out the rest of the goblins. In the end, Kamiya's team clutches the win after a brutal fight that left their swords looking seriously haggard. As the sun rises, the villagers just erupt in celebration. Kamiya gets a system notification, congratulating them for surviving the 4th day, and the whole crew heads back to base. The second they're back, Aesel sprints directly into his mother's arms. Kamiya feels a huge sense of relief for being able to change Asel's grim fate, and now he's more determined than ever to face the stampede without losing a single person. No cap, that's his confidence level. But little does he know, this game world always gets its pound of flesh. Soon after, Kamiya manages to upgrade the base to level 5. The villagers can't believe the massive changes that came with the upgrade, and Sylvan is especially shook. He's finally witnessing the true cracked power of the magic stone. Apparently, the only reason they could pull this off was thanks to all the monsters they killed and the huge amount of supplies they gathered from the forest. See, everything they collect automatically gets stored as resources in the magic stone, which they can then spend to beef up the base. It's all done through the magic stone's power. As the base gets stronger, the residents also get a massive boost to their own growth potential. This basically means that the more fortified their home is, the more powerful everyone living there becomes. But Kamiya has to lay down the law, telling them they won't just get stronger by doing nothing, because real change only happens through training and experience. Kamiya tells them to wrap up what they're doing ASAP so they can get started on their usual training routine. Thanks to them being able to use the instant build mode to raise the base level, Kamiya has already secured a ton of personnel and equipment that's pretty OP for this early in the game. Their coordination is so tight that they managed to survive the next 2 raids without breaking a sweat. Every NPC leveled up their teamwork, became silky smooth, and even Asel's growth started hitting different, happening at an insane pace. And since that pivotal moment, the game's AI hasn't tried to target Aesel even once. Before they even knew it, the 7th day had arrived. This was the big one, the day they had to challenge the stampede. Early that morning, Rira finds Kamiya already up and tending to the swords. She walks over and tells him that breakfast is ready. Kamiya thanks her, and she asks him what he's working on. He tells her he's sorting out the weapons with low durability because with the stampede happening that night, it would be absolutely fatal if their swords broke mid-battle. To make it easy to tell them apart, Kamiya is tying red strings onto the hilts of the weak ones. He sees another fighter walk by and warns him not to use any of the swords marked with red since their durability is shot. He makes sure to tell him to pass the message along to everyone else. After this, Rira says again that breakfast is ready, but Kamiya is still too focused to eat. As he informs the woman that he's got to check the traps first that evening, Kamiya rallies the troops, announcing that the day they've all been dreading has finally arrived. It's the 7th day, the day the stampede hits. He doesn't sugarcoat it, letting them know that this wave is probably going to be on a whole different level than anything they've ever faced. Kamiya orders everyone who's staying inside the base to arm themselves, because they'll need to defend it from the inside as well. Kamiya lays out the strategy, explaining they're going to use a tight formation so they don't get completely swamped by the enemy's insane numbers. He maps out the positions and, like a true leader, puts himself right at the very front. Waldo is positioned right behind him, while Anemone takes the rear guard where she can rain down hell with her long-range attacks. Once the formation is set, he gives the word and tells the fighters it's time to roll out. He also tells them to do a final weapons check, but Aesel is holding a sorry-looking sword because my guy apparently missed the memo. Still, the dude joins Kamiya on the front lines anyway, as everyone braces for the fight of their lives. Kamiya yells for them to shut the gates while they get ready for the oncoming horde. Rira and the rest of the residents then hunker down behind the gate's weapons in hand, ready to hold the last line of defense. Rira gets up from her spot to go see how her son is doing, and her heart just drops when she sees he's holding one of those trash-tier weapons. A few moments later, the goblins start pouring out in huge numbers. And bruh, they look like they haven't eaten in weeks and are ready for The system notification flashes red, giving Kamiya the usual heads up about the massive invasion that's about to go down. Their mission is to survive the onslaught, but no cap. The real highlight is Assel's blade, which is just comically weak. With a sea of goblins swarming towards them, one of the villagers starts shaking totally, losing it over how many there are. But Kamiya is having none of that, hyping his people up and telling them not to flinch, because this is the very day they've been grinding for. With a commanding shout, Kamiya orders Anemone to let the flaming arrows fly. Anemone and the other archers immediately get to work, unleashing a volley of arrows straight into the goblin mosh pit. The arrows make impact and trigger a massive explosion that completely vaporizes the goblins caught in the blast. Waldo and the fighters are totally blown away by the sight, calling it the sickest fireworks display ever. Loki Kamiya had been power leveling this whole time just so he could get gunpowder production up and running. He intentionally kept the landmine design super simple. Our MC figured that'd be more than enough to deal with a pack of brain-dead goblins. Kamiya then shouts for the fighters to get ready because the party's far from over. A second wave of goblins storms out from the forest, and these ones look way more ticked off than the first batch. But this doesn't scare Kamiya or his squad one bit. They have zero chill and start effortlessly slicing through the goblins rushing them. Up in the watchtower, Anemone tells her squad to let the frontline warriors handle the ground troops. Their job is to pick off the enemies coming from the rear, but damn, the number of goblins just keeps on growing. Some of them even manage to reach the fence. But the villagers posted up behind the barrier are able to fight them off, while Kamiya and his crew maintain their advantage. As goblins start getting wrecked by the traps they'd set up earlier, Kamiya's already praising his team. He's feeling hyped about how they're dominating the field, thinking they might actually have a shot at turning this whole nightmare around. Kamiya barely finishes his sentence when a seriously disturbing noise echoes out and the ground itself begins to tremble. Anemone, who's still up in the watchtower, screams down to Kamiya, warning him that something massive is headed their way. And right on cue, a gigantic, horrifying goblin emerges from the tree line. The sight leaves Kamiya absolutely frozen and his jaw on the floor. What just showed up is a goblin lord, a high-ranking subspecies that's built different packing, some overwhelming power. Its roar alone acts like a buff, giving all the other goblins a temporary boost to their stats. Kamiya literally can't believe what he's seeing, because a goblin lord has no business showing up in the very first stampede. As if that wasn't a big enough problem, the goblin lord rolls up with even more goblin minions. And to make everything so much worse, this new batch of goblins looks way stronger than all the others. Rira's heart drops as she spots her son getting absolutely mauled by one of the goblins. She's terrified that if this keeps up, things are going to go south real fast, especially while everyone else is busy fighting off the horde. Without a second thought, Rira takes off from the fence line. Just then, one of the goblins smashes through the barricade, and Kamiya yells at the top of his lungs to warn everybody. Anemone sees the situation spiraling and tells her crew it's time to ditch the watchtower and provide some backup on the ground. Anemone Yipkini and Tsuran, and her squad leap down. She sticks the landing perfectly, but one of her guys isn't so lucky and eats dirt hard. He screams out in pain, and Anemone has to drag his butt over to the people behind the fence so they can patch him up. But while she's doing this, Rira sprints right past her clutching a sword. Anemone immediately yells at her. She's like, "Bruh, where do you think you're going?" Because Rira is literally beelining it for the front lines. Rira barely gets 10 feet before she comes face to face with a goblin. She completely freezes up in fear, but just before the creature can turn her into lunch, Anemone one-taps the goblin. A clean, precise arrow to the head. Anemone then stomps over to Rira, demanding to know what the hell she was thinking. Rira blurts out that she has to get this sword to Azel, because the weapon he's using right now has the durability of a wet paper towel. This news completely floors Anemone, who immediately orders her squad to fall back, since she's now heading to the front lines herself. Anemone tells Rira to keep moving forward, promising to cover her by holding off the goblins. As Rira makes a run for it, Anemone lays down covering fire, peppering the area with arrows to keep the goblins from getting anywhere near her. Anemone eventually pulls back to the fence, and as she stands on top watching the battlefield, she gets a bad feeling. She can just tell that this whole thing is about to get a whole lot uglier. At this point, even the fighters on the front lines are getting overwhelmed because they never expected the goblins to suddenly get a massive power-up out of nowhere. That's when Kamiya clues them in that the Goblin Lord is the source of all their problems. Even Kamiya is shook that a high-level mob like that is showing up in a Day 7 stampede. Some of the fighters soon find themselves squared up against the Goblin Lord itself, who raises its massive weapon ready to turn them into a pancake. They throw up their shields trying to block the incoming hit, but the Goblin Lord's swing is so ridiculously powerful, it flattens the nearby goblins too. The sheer force of the blow sends a few fighters flying, and Kamiya shouts to see if they're still able to get up. Shockingly, Osol and another fighter get to their feet and move in to support Kamiya. The Goblin Lord winds up for another attack, swinging its giant mace straight at Kamiya. But just as the weapon is about to connect, something clicks in Kamiya's head, and he manages to parry the attack. And no cap, everyone is absolutely stunned. Kamiya can't help but celebrate a little. I mean, it's a standard mechanic in video games, but pulling off a perfect parry in real life just hits different. The Goblin Lord definitely feels the parry, and it gets seriously ticked off. It lets out a massive roar, basically ordering its minions to charge the front lines. Acel and the others immediately jump in to form a wall in front of Kamiya, telling him they'll handle the small fry so he can focus on the big boss. They tell him to finish the Goblin Lord off quickly, because they're all running on fumes. With that, Kamiya charges straight for the boss. As he parries another one of its devastating attacks, even Kamiya can see that a battle of attrition is a losing game for them. He knew he had to figure out a way to end this fight, and fast. Right then, he hears Leafy call out his name. He immediately tells her to pull up the ring console. Leafy confirms the command and opens the console, and that's when Kamiya notices the AI balancing feature is active. Leafy asks what he's looking for, and he points out that not only is the ring modifier on, but the generation AI is completely overloaded. And he knows that means he can trigger an all-critical state. Leafy is totally lost, having no clue what all-critical is even supposed to mean. So a critical hit is basically an attack that punches right through defense and deals double damage. But usually whether or not you land one is decided by random number generation, or RNG. Think of RNG as the game constantly rolling a virtual pair of dice. Those numbers determine pretty much all the probabilities in the game. But, and this is the kicker, the game has a bug and exploit that the devs never got around to fixing. So, if you manage to parry 15 attacks in a row, the game's AI tries to mess with the numbers because it thinks the hit rates are way too low. But get this, that exact adjustment is what crashes the memory, causing the entire RNG system to just freeze up. And the wild result is that every single attack lands as a critical hit. Leafy is totally shook when she hears this, but for Kamiya Brew, a light bulb just went off in his head. The only reason he never bothered patching this bug is because pulling off 15 parries back-to-back was basically a myth even during playtesting. With this new info, Kamiya is now laser-focused on hitting that 15 parry streak. He starts baiting the Goblin Lord into attacking him, parrying each blow while keeping a running count. Acel thinks he's getting clapped and yells his name, but Kamiya just tells him to chill out. He's got a plan cooking. Right then, Rira finally breaks through to the front lines and sees her son getting absolutely bodied by one of the goblins. Kamiya keeps on taunting the Goblin Lord, making damn sure he parries every single swing that comes his way. Before he even realizes it, he's at 13, and he knows if he just keeps this rhythm going, he's got it in the bag. But then all of a sudden, a goblin slips past Acel and makes a beeline straight for Kamiya, right as he hits the 14th parry. Acel immediately chases after the creature. Just as it's about to slice Kamiya, Acel dives in to intercept the attack. He smacks the goblin clean on its head, but his sword just shatters on impact. This leaves him wide open, but Rira comes in with a clutch save, yeeting a brand new sword over to Acel. With the fresh blade in hand, Acel is able to slice the goblin down for good. Luckily, at that exact same moment, Kamiya hits his 15th count, perfectly parrying the final attack. A huge grin spreads across Kamiya's face, because he's finally unlocked the ultimate cheat code. He yells to his crew that this'll all be over in a second, and without wasting a single moment, he blitzes the Goblin Lord. He unleashes a flurry of high-speed slashes across the Goblin Lord's body, landing the finishing blow right on its neck. Kamiya stylishly leaps off the Goblin's corpse and sticks a perfect superhero landing just for the extra flair. After taking all those critical hits, the Goblin had zero chance and comes crashing down with a heavy thud. The other goblins see their boss get absolutely wrecked and instantly know they're cooked. Without a second thought, they all just dip, completely abandoning the fight. Waldo and the others are just standing there, jaws on the floor, because they can't believe Kamiya actually soloed that giant. That scary-ass goblin is down, and Rira and her son stand next to its body, sharing a victorious smile. But what they didn't know was that the Goblin Lord wasn't completely out of the fight yet. With its last bit of strength, it lunges for Asul, but Rira instantly jumps in the way to shield her son. Instead of hitting Asul, the goblin's claws tear right through Rira. Kamiya is stunned. He had no idea the goblin could still even move after all that. He immediately rushes in and delivers the true final blow to end it, but the damage is done. The goblin has torn Rira's chest wide open. All Kamiya can do is watch, as Asel breaks down crying over his mother. As she's dying, she tells Asel she's going to go meet his father, and asks him to always tell her plenty of stories. And with those final words, Rira passes away and Asel lets out a raw scream of pure agony. Everyone else just watches in horrified silence as Asel grieves for his dying mother. Right on cue, the Stampede Quest cleared notification pops up, but it's the kind of good news that just brings more tears. The next morning, Kamiya is just staring at Rira's grave when Leafy appears, telling him she couldn't find any reason why the Goblin Lord showed up, but at the same time, there's no sign that anyone messed with the game's settings. Leafy then reminds him that he can still make small adjustments to the game's settings. Even though he's been stripped of his Game Master privileges, he isn't completely powerless. Leafy keeps yapping on until she realizes Kamiya isn't even paying attention to a word she's saying. That's when Kamiya admits he was way too arrogant. Since he was the one who built the game, he just assumed he knew everything about it. That cockiness made him believe he could handle any curveball the game threw at him. In the end, he blames himself for Rira's death. Because in the grand scheme of things, she wasn't ever supposed to die. Luffy tries to snap him out of it, saying that if it wasn't for his big brain plays, the entire base would have been absolutely wrecked. Luffy points out that all the NPCs who are still kicking have him to thank, and while Kamiya doesn't deny they're alive, he's low-key blaming himself for it all. He's convinced that since he's the one who literally created them, he's also the one who just left them here to suffer inside this game. The guilt is just too much. Kamiya just dips, telling Leafy he needs a minute to himself to process everything. A little while later, Anemone tracks him down to where he's sitting and moping. She hits him with a, "What you doing?" But he's not in a talking mood and just ghosts her. So Anemone just casually raises her bow, lets an arrow fly, and totally snipes one of the birds flying overhead. Kamiya is completely shook, and Anemone uses it as a teachable moment, explaining that in this world, they're constantly putting their lives on the line just to make it to the next day. Anemone lays it out plain and simple. Sometimes they have to take a life, and other times it's their own life that gets taken. But she doesn't think it's anyone's fault. That's just the brutal reality of their world. It is what it is. You can tell Kamiya wants to argue, but honestly, he can't even come up with the words to fight back. Anemone can see he's still a mess, so she tells him to get up and follow her, saying she's got something he needs to see. She leads him over to the training grounds, and what do you know, Asel is already back on his grind. And no cap, the kid is going all out, looking nothing like someone who just tragically lost his mother. Anemone tells Kamiya that Asel has been out here training non-stop ever since the funeral, which completely floors Kamiya. She explains that Asel wants to have a ton of epic stories to tell his mom in the afterlife, so he's dead set on leveling up his own stats. Right on cue, the guy Asel is training with taps out begging for a break. Asel turns around and is totally surprised to see Kamiya standing there. He immediately bolts over a huge grin on his face and asks Osol if he'll be his sparring partner. Osol tells Kamiya he's determined to get stronger, so he'll have tons of adventures to share with his mom, and because of that, he's not planning on losing anytime soon. Hearing that determination from Osol really hits different for Kamiya, and he agrees, saying the kid is absolutely right. Kamiya grabs a sword for himself. He tells Osol that he's going all out, no holding back. Osol is totally hyped for the challenge and immediately charges straight at Kamiya. Kamiya finally snaps out of his self-pity party, realizing that these NPCs aren't just code, they're actually alive. And not only that, they're living their lives with a strength and resilience that he couldn't have even imagined. Since that's the reality, Kamiya decides he can't be the one dragging them down. Nah, he's got to show them a path they can be proud of. Meanwhile, in a nearby forest, we see two dwarves, a master craftsman and his apprentice. They're hanging out in the woods pretty close to the base. The master spots a bent arrow on the ground and tells his apprentice that he can feel the faintest trace of mana coming from it. This is huge because it means the arrow was forged using a magic stone. The apprentice is shook by this revelation, and his master says this could be the big break they've been searching for. It doesn't take long for the dwarven duo to start closing in on the base's location. Back at the village, everyone's just doing their thing when suddenly the two dwarves show up at the main gate. Leafy runs to tell Kamiya they have visitors, but he doesn't even flinch, almost like he was expecting them to show up. The dwarven master, a dude named Dorn, has zero chill, and immediately demands to speak with whoever is in charge. His apprentice Ginger is trying to get him to calm down, telling him that it wouldn't kill him to be a little polite. Kamiya strolls up to the gate and tells Dorn he's the guy he's looking for. Dorn cuts right to the chase. He asks Kamiya point blank if he's got any mana stones in the village. Ginger can't believe how blunt his master is and jumps in. He tries to smooth things over, explaining to Kamiya that they're just a couple of traveling craftsmen on the hunt for rare materials. Ginger says they caught a rumor that there might be some mana stones in the area, and they were really hoping that Kamiya might be willing to let them take a look at the stones. Kamiya just tells the two of them that dinner was about to be served. He suggests they all sit down for a meal, inviting them inside and saying they can talk business while they eat. Ginger is all for it and enthusiastically accepts the offer, but Dorn looks like he couldn't care less about food. A few minutes later, they're all at the dinner table, and Ginger's mind is completely blown by everything he sees. Kamiya knows these two are master craftsmen. He's already thinking ahead. If he can get these two to join his village, he'll finally be able to handle equipment upgrades and start developing some serious magic tools, plus some weapons he just can't craft himself. While they are chowing down, Kamiya asks Dorn if seeing the mana stones threw him off, and he admits it did. Ginger then spills the beans, revealing they're actually on a journey to find a legendary material known as the Philosopher's Stone. Apparently, the Philosopher's Stone is treated like a myth, but low-key most people are convinced it's totally real. There are even weapons floating around today that were supposedly forged with the stone, but even the dwarves who've been around forever have never actually laid eyes on the real Philosopher's Stone. Ginger explains that for craftsmen like them, it's the ultimate endgame material that they've just got to get their hands on. But deep down, Kamiya knows there's a Philosopher's Stone right there in his sage's book. The catch, he made it a reward for a crazy high-level raid quest. It's something that's literally impossible to get through normal gameplay. So basically, Kamiya is the only person on the planet who can access the stone. He explains that the stone isn't just about mana, but about the very relationship between different powers. Kamiya swears he isn't hiding anything inside the mana stone, but he insists there's a solid reason for how it's set up. He then asks the two dwarves again if they're sure they want to see the stone, reminding them that even a chunk of raw mana ore is incredibly rare. Kamiya stresses that the ore is vital to his village, and Ginger quickly reassures him that they just want to use it as a reference, nothing more. Since they only want a quick look, Kamiya doesn't see a problem with it, but he tells them there's a price in exchange for a peek. They're going to have to forge some weapons for the village. Kamiya reveals that they're getting swarmed by monsters almost every single night, and to keep his people safe, they need some top-tier gear. Dorn agrees, figuring it's a small price to pay. Kamiya tells him he'll show them the mana stone as soon as they're done with their meal. Still, Kamiya is internally stressing about how he's going to actually convince these dwarves to stick around and join his village. A few moments later, he leads them to a cabin to finally show them the mana stone. After one look, Dorn just rips into Kamiya, asking why he'd show them something so ugly, because this definitely ain't what he's searching for. Kamiya is absolutely floored that Dorn already pieced together that the mana stone is more of a gate than anything else. It's basically just a channel for mana, a completely different beast from the crafting material they are hunting for. Kamiya can't help but be impressed. Dorn's insight is no cap spot on, and Dorn isn't wrong because the mana stone is really just a player interface from the game. It's not the kind of thing you can just mine and use as a raw material. Dorn then thanks Kamiya for showing them the stone, but he makes it clear that this doesn't help his search for the Philosopher's Stone at all. Dorn drops the bomb that they'll be leaving first thing in the morning. Ginger is visibly shocked, and Kamiya tells Dorn that he's more than welcome to stay longer. If he wants mentioning, they have a whole unused workshop and plenty of materials that can be generated using the mana stone. Kamiya really lays it on thick, telling them he can provide an absolutely perfect environment for their craft. But even with all these amazing offers, Dorn just shuts him down flat, leaving Kamiya sighing in disappointment. Since they're not staying, he makes sure to remind Dorn about his promise to forge those weapons. Monsters are definitely going to show up again that night after all. Kamiya tells them he'll lead them to the workshop, and that they can use any of the equipment they find there. On the side, Leafy is starting to get scared that the dwarves will never join them. Kamiya has to agree with her, admitting that Dorn's heart is completely set on finding the Philosopher's Stone. Anything short of that just won't be enough to sway him. But Kamiya has a new angle. He knows Ginger is still young and hungry for recognition. As a craftsman, he's probably dying to see how people react to his creations and to find out just how skilled he really is. The kind of impact his skills could have. Kamiya totally gets it, saying that's the exact same rush he felt back when he first started developing games. Kamiya is betting that Ginger will choose to stay once he sees the insane potential he can unlock right here in the village. Later that night, monsters swarm the village, and Ginger is absolutely shook to see a real-life raid going down. As the fight rages on, the archers are hyping up the reinforced arrowheads he made. They're blown away by the insane piercing power, no cap. Ginger overhears them and mutters that if he'd had more time, he could have even jacked up the accuracy. But the archers aren't tripping. They let him know they're just grateful for what he's already done, 'cause it's more than enough. At the same time, Ginger's eyes are glued on Waldo, who's a straight-up beast with his sword. Based on his movements, Ginger thinks a massive greatsword would be a way better fit for a dude that built. He also clocks that Ace could be a way better fighter if someone tweaked the center of gravity on his weapon. While he's lost in his own world, geeking out over all the upgrades he could make, his master is watching from the sidelines. And it's clear as day that Ginger is starting to get invested. In the middle of the chaotic battle, Luffy asks Kamiya if he seriously thinks Ginger will join their crew. Kamiya admits his words alone might not seal the deal, but from the looks of it, it seems like Ginger is already having the time of his life. The next morning, Ginger is stepping out of the workshop ready to bounce when a villager passes by. He gets a genuine thank you for his help during the attack. Then another villager comes up telling him they smoked the enemies with ease all thanks to him. Ginger can't help but smile, saying he's glad he was able to help out. Then Waldo and Acel roll up too. Waldo is gushing about how the sword Ginger made for him was insanely sharp and just built different. Acel also thanks Ginger for tweaking his sword, admitting it's made his swings feel way more natural. Waldo then gives Ginger a playful slap on the back, telling him he should just ditch his master and stay in the village so he can cook up a custom weapon for him. But Acel drops the bomb on Waldo that Ginger and his master are actually leaving today, which totally catches Waldo off guard. He says it's a huge shame they're taking off. As they walk away, Waldo gives his farewells, saying he's sure they'll cross paths again. All their words are really hitting Ginger hard, and he's still processing it all, when Kamiya appears and asks if he's really about to leave. Ginger confirms it, explaining that his master is laser-focused on finding the Philosopher's Stone. Kamiya then hits him with the real question, asking what he wants to do. Ginger just stares at him, confused, so Kamiya spells it out, saying it's obvious that the Philosopher's Stone isn't the only thing he's passionate about. Kamiya doesn't sugarcoat it. Life in the village is tough. Monsters attack every single night, and even with their magic stones, their resources are stretched thin. Kamiya just comes out and says it, they're seriously short-staffed as it is. He tells Ginger that this is exactly why the village needs him. His skills make a massive difference. Kamiya lays it on thick, telling Ginger that his blacksmithing skills literally decide how long the villagers get to live. Kamiya then holds out his hand, urging Ginger to join them and make the village his new home. But before he can answer, Dorn steps out of the workshop, announcing that they're all packed up and ready to go. Ginger, snapping out of it, finally tells Dorn that he wants to stay behind in the village. Dorn is completely stunned by this. He asks Ginger if he's being for real, and Ginger says he's 100% serious. In response, Dorn tells him he has to forge a weapon. Ginger has no idea what he's talking about, but Dorn explains that he can't let some trash-tier apprentice wander around claiming to be his student, so he's got to forge a weapon to prove he's not a complete scrub. Ginger is down for the challenge and immediately gets to work on a new weapon. As he's grinding away, Kamiya asks if he needs anything, offering to generate materials for him using the magic stone. Ginger gives Kamiya a nod of thanks, but says he's got to handle this with his own 2 hands. Otherwise, the whole thing would be completely meaningless to him. Hearing this, Kamiya just cracks a smile and steps back, letting the man cook. A little while later, Ginger puts the finishing touches on the sword, and Dorn steps up to inspect it. Dorn immediately sees that Ginger didn't just forge a sword, he forged it specifically for a human to wield. Dorn points out that a second-rate smith only sees the metal, but a true master sees the person who will use the weapon. Since Ginger tailored the blade for a human warrior, Dorn knows exactly where his focus is. It hits Dorn that they're just built different. He's got his own flame and Ginger's got his. Dorn is low-key blown away by what the kid managed to pull off. He tells Ginger never to let that fire die out and to always follow the flame burning inside him. Ginger is totally floored and asks his master if this means he passed, but Dorn just stays silent. As he's walking away, he tells Kamiya that Ginger is his problem now, before disappearing into the forest. And Ginger gives his master a deep bow, grateful for every lesson he learned. Leafy and Kamiya share a grin hyped that they've finally landed a master craftsman. Leafy says it's time to give their production base a major glow-up. Kamiya is on the exact same page, agreeing it's time to raise the base level. Just like that, Kamiya jacks the base level up to 8, and Ginger's mind is absolutely blown seeing the stone's true power for the first time. With the base level increase the outer walls, and the workshop gets some sick new upgrades too. When Ginger steps inside the new workshop, his jaw hits the floor. Kamiya tells him the entire workshop is his to command, so he can go wild and use it however he sees fit. Ginger can't thank Kamiya enough for the opportunity. He's practically buzzing talking about all the new things he's dying to try out. After they leave the workshop, Kamiya tells Leafy that recruiting Ginger was a total game changer, especially with the massive fights they know are just around the corner. Kamiya admits their current equipment is pretty trash, and that's exactly where Ginger is going to shine. It turns out the level up also buffed the amount of resources the magic stone can hold. Kamiya then says he wants to start farming mana in the next few battles. No cap with Ginger on the team, and the base hitting level 8, Kamiya and Leafy are expecting a certain female character to show up soon. Thanks to the new and improved gear, the village started absolutely clapping their enemies in every fight. This seriously lightened the load on the villagers who had to go out and fight, and it turns out Ginger is also playing a support role. He's providing backup against any enemies spotted from the watchtower. They've only got 3 more days until the next horde attack, so Kamiya knows they have to grind hard to fortify their defenses. On the 11th day, Ginger calls all the villagers together, saying he's got something to show them. Everyone is just staring completely shocked at the massive pile of clay in front of them. Ginger then reveals that these things are... He explains that it's basically a magic-powered doll that can move all on its own. Golems are essentially support units that can join the NPCs in battle, and they can copy the role of whatever character is set as their master. So you set a swordsman as the master, and the golem will use... You set an archer, and it'll know how to sling arrows. It's that simple. Their stats are pretty much just a nerfed version of their masters, but they're super useful for beefing up the army's numbers. Ginger says he's always wanted to make one, and being so close to the magic stone is what gives him the juice to bring them to life. Anemone gets curious and asks Ginger if the golem can actually move. Ginger tells her that as soon as it gets a master, it'll fight just like them, but its overall abilities will be a bit weaker. Another villager asks if the golems can help out with chores, and Ginger confirms that they absolutely can, that they could do pretty much anything with the golems. But out of nowhere, the golem's eyes suddenly flare to life, which totally catches Ginger off guard, because they weren't supposed to be reacting to anything. He starts wondering if there's some other mana source nearby, but right then one of the villagers starts screaming his head off. He's yelling that someone's approaching the village. This mysterious figure rolls up to the gate, and when they finally pull back their hood, it turns out to be an elf. Sporting a massive grin, she introduces herself as Ulisha Vibwald, and then drops an absolute bombshell on everyone. She's there to challenge the village leader to a duel. And get this, Ulisha isn't just some rando. Turns out she's the literal daughter of the Queen of the White Forest. Kamiya is low-key, not even shocked by this, since her showing up basically means he's cleared all the conditions to get Ulisha to join his side. So, Kamiya steps up, letting her know that he's the guy in charge around here. Ulisha lays out the stakes if he loses, she takes over as village leader. She assures Kamiya, though, that there's nothing to worry about because she's going to totally transform the village for the better. Kamiya just grins at her confidence and asks what she's willing to bet if things don't go her way. Ulisha is like, losing that's not even a possibility. But just to play along, she tells Kamiya he can ask for literally anything he wants from her if she fails. Kamiya just checks if she's for real about that, and she swears on her own mother's name that she absolutely will not go back on her promise. All this confidence has Leafy feeling pretty nervous, but Kamiya is standing his ground totally unfazed as he gets ready to face Ulisha. While they get ready to fight, all the villagers scramble behind the fence so they don't get caught in the crossfire. Sylvan, who's just casually enjoying some wine, asks who the heck Ulisha is, and Ginger fills him in that she's an elf from the White Forest clan. He explains that her people are super reclusive and almost never venture out into the rest of the world. Waldo just busts out laughing when he remembers Ulysses' whole "I'm gonna be the new leader" speech. It's basically a strongest person becomes the chief kind of deal. Once everyone is ready, Kamiya turns to Ulysses. He tells her the fight is on the second the coin he's about to flip lands on the ground. Kamiya flips it high, and the exact moment it hits the ground, Ulysses immediately launches a vicious wind attack straight at Kamiya. Somehow, Kamiya actually manages to dodge it, leaving the villagers completely shook, because it all happened in the blink of an eye. Since they've never witnessed anything like that, Ginger explains that Ulysses is using attack magic, and based on what they're seeing, she's got some serious skills. While the villagers are biting their nails, worried that Kamiya is about to get himself into some deep trouble, Ulysses is actually impressed that he's holding his own so well. But she's not going to go easy on him. She starts ramping up her attacks to really see what Kamiya is made of. Still, Kamiya manages to evade every single attack she throws his way. See, Ulysses is basically a noob killer character in the game. Her wind magic is cracked because it's so hard to see, and if a player doesn't figure out her patterns, they're toast. It's a guaranteed loss, which means no chance of ever recruiting her to your side. Kamiya, though, is feeling pretty confident. He can perfectly read her next move just by watching the subtle flicks of her wand. Just as she launches another spell right for his face, Kamiya casually brings up his shield and blocks it dead. This completely blows Ulysses' mind. She's never seen anyone do that before. Turns out her magic absolutely shreds through flesh and blood monsters, but it can't even scratch a solid iron shield, especially not one forged by their master black. While Ulysses is still trying to figure out what just happened, Kamiya closes the distance. But right as he's about to land a hit, she uses her wind magic to blast off into the air. The villagers are absolutely losing it all, wishing they could fly just like her. While she's airborne, she starts charging up a seriously high-level spell, and Kamiya knows that if that thing connects, it's lights out for him. Even so, he doesn't hesitate, and just keeps rushing forward. Ulysses starts trash-talking him, thinking he's just running, straight to his doom. But little does she know, he's got a master plan cooking. She finishes chanting this massive spell, and launches it at Kamiya, but then poof, it just fizzles out into thin air. And she's just left there completely shook. Before she can even process what happened, Kamiya yanks her down hard with a sling. He then drags her in close, puts his blade right to her throat, and makes it crystal clear that she's lost. Kamiya explains that her high-tier magic was a total bust, because the magic stones in this area are absolute garbage. In short, the environment just doesn't have enough juice to fuel big-time magic, and now Ulysses is totally floored and can't even get up. Kamiya chalks it up as his W, and while Ulysses has to agree she lost, she's still having a full-on meltdown. I mean, she got absolutely bodied by a dude who doesn't even use magic. That's when Kamiya reminds her about the little promise she made. She looks like she's about to faint when the reality hits her. She has to do literally anything he says. And no cap, the first thing Kamiya asks is for her to join his squad. She has zero choice but to agree. Then Kamiya tells her to clean up the entire battlefield. After all, she's the one who went on a rampage and wrecked. Leafy then points out that having Ulysses, a real-deal mage, on their team is a pretty huge bonus. Kamiya couldn't agree more, and with her on board, he suggests they spend the night testing out some new strategies. So, Kamiya and the crew head deep into the forest, and as they're walking, Kamiya asks Leafy if she's got any intel. He wants to know if she has any clue what's going down in the real world. But Leafy tells him she's completely firewalled off from the real world while she's in here. She says the only thing she knows for sure is that the Game Master was recently switched out. Kamiya reveals that this whole GM switch is exactly why different parts of the game are bugging out and going completely sideways. He then tells Leafy that he's dead set on grinding his way to level 100 as fast as he possibly can. Leafy asks him what the big rush is, and he drops a bombshell the second he hits level 100, he gets access to the tower. He explains that even though he's running in developer mode, there are still some major limitations on what he can do. To break past those limits, he says he absolutely has to get to the tower to get the power he needs. Suddenly, Ulysses cuts him off, whining about how much longer they have to keep walking. Kamiya just fires back that they'll keep going until they find some monsters to fight. It turns out Kamiya's whole plan is to test run Ulysses' magic with the golems to prep for the battles ahead. Kamiya asks her what kind of magic she's got in her arsenal, and she starts flexing about her wind magic and other elemental skills. But Kamiya cuts right through the BS and asks her how much power she can actually use in their current location. She admits she can only pull off a few weak wind-based attacks and some basic movement support spells. Seeing the "I'm not impressed" look on Kamiya's face, She quickly tries to defend herself, saying she's only this weak because the area is flooded with low-grade mana stones, insisting she could do way more if she had some high-quality ones. Kamiya tells her he's not blaming her, but she needs to get a grip on her actual capabilities and her limits. He doesn't want a repeat of the epic fail she pulled earlier. Ginger then asks Kamiya if his plan is to pair Ulyssia with the golems, and Kamiya confirms it since they don't have any other magic users on the payroll. He's thinking that linking the golems to her magic will give them a ton of new tactical options. He suggests they set Ulyssia as the golem's master, which would let it copy her magic even if it's not quite as strong. Kamiya then tells Ulyssia to start injecting her mana directly into the golems to teach them her spells. Ulyssia is down for it, placing her hand on a golem and letting her magic flow right into its stone body. Once that's done, Kamiya tells her she can give them commands just by visualizing them. So, Ulyssia closes her eyes and casts a spell to float up into the air. When she opens her eyes, she sees the golems are floating right there with her. The first trial is a massive success. Hyped, Kamiya tells her to use the same trick to go wipe out some monster bunnies he spots in the distance. Ulyssia is more than happy to take that order. She low-key despises monsters, so this is perfect. She launches a wind attack at the bunnies, and to her surprise, the golems perfectly copy her, unleashing their own wind blast. Ulyssia is having an absolute blast with this, adding a little extra flair to her attacks and sending the bunnies running for their lives. Even though the monsters are already trying to retreat, Ulyssia isn't having it and yeets a massive wind blast to wipe most of them out. Once the mobs are cleared, she floats down and has to admit that the golems are actually low-key useful. Kamiya hits her with the facts, explaining that the golem's power is tied to its masters, which means she can't afford to slack off during training. She's so over being told what to do and just brushes him off, saying she gets it already. Hearing this, Kamiya cracks a smile, knowing they've just secured a huge advantage for future fights. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Onohara is absolutely losing his mind, because his entire master plan is crashing and burning. He's already cooking up a new way, more aggressive strategy to deal with the whole situation. That night, just like clockwork, the monsters show up again. And right on cue, Kamiya gets the standard Survive the Night quest on his screen. But in a big brain move, Kamiya puts Ulyssia and her golems right on the front lines, telling her she's the key to their victory. Being the arrogant princess she is, she just casually replies that she already knew that. As the monster wave gets closer, Kamiya notices something different. The goblins are moving in a coordinated formation. He doesn't sweat it too much, figuring that as the base levels up, the enemies are just going to get weirder with their tactics. It's only natural that their fighting style will evolve. For Kamiya, this just means it's time for their village to step up its own strategic game. Anemone and her squad make the first move, unleashing a volley of arrows on the goblins to shatter their formation. Ulyssia is right there with her firing off powerful magic spells with a huge grin plastered on her face. As she charges toward the goblin horde, her loyal golems stick right by her side. Kamiya put her on the front lines for a reason. Her insane power and mobility make her a one-woman cavalry unit. With Anemone and Ulyssia handling the long-range chaos, Kamiya gives the melee squad the signal to engage the goblins head-on. Waldo and his team handle the enemies on the left flank, while Kamiya covers the right, supporting them with ranged attacks. This strategy pins the enemies down and completely halts their advance. It makes it super easy for the ground troops to dish out some serious damage. With Kamiya's plan running so smoothly, everyone on the battlefield is having a blast, way more than they usually do. Kamiya then yells for Waldo to push forward quickly so they can take out the leader and end this fight for good. Waldo confirms he's on it and starts sprinting towards the goblin leader, completely unaware of what's about to happen. He has no idea that Ulyssia is also gunning for the exact same target. Waldo is seconds away from getting blasted by Ulyssia's spell, but she screams at him, giving him just enough time to dive out of the way. Waldo flips out, yelling at Ulyssia and asking what her problem is. She fires right back, claiming he was the one who got in her way. And while these two are busy throwing a fit, Waldo is completely oblivious to a goblin that has snuck up right behind him. Luckily, Kamiya spots the danger and warns him just before he gets sliced in two by the trash mob. Waldo parries the blow, and Kamiya tells him to keep holding the line while the rest of the team finishes the job. Waldo manages to break away from the goblin mob and thrusts his sword deep into the leader's neck, killing him instantly. The other goblins watch their leader fall, and pure terror takes over, but Kamiya and his crew show zero mercy and start hunting them down. They make damn sure to wipe every last one of them off the map. After the dust settles, it happens exactly as you'd expect. Waldo stomps over to Ulysses and starts screaming at her for nearly turning him into a crispy critter. Kamiya knew this kind of drama was inevitable since their teamwork is still a total mess. Still, he knows that Ulysses is an S-tier asset to their team no cap. Kamiya is now dead set on perfecting their combat strategy before the next stampede hits in just 3 days.